He woke to a sound that didn't belong at his door, slow breathing, strained and controlled like someone trying not to be noticed. When he cracked the porch light, a German shepherd stood there soaked in rain, one leg barely touching the wood, eyes locked on him like it had already decided he was the last option. The dog didn't beg, didn't whine, just waited. And when it finally tried to stand inside his doorway, it collapsed without a sound. That's when the man dropped to his knees and his hands moved like muscle memory, checking gums, counting breaths, wrapping the leg like he'd done it 100 times before. The kind of first aid you don't forget unless you're trying to forget everything that came with it. Because this dog didn't just show up injured. It showed up carrying a past he buried, and it was about to force him to use it again. Before we start, please subscribe. When we hit 100,000 subscribers, I'll be buying a dog I truly admire, a Tibetan Mastiff. Let me know in the comment. Do I have bad taste, or is that a solid choice? The man had arranged his life so that very little could reach him. He lived far enough from town that people did not pass by unless they meant to, and most never did. The road that led to his place ended in gravel and then dirt, and after that it belonged more to animals than to people. He had chosen it that way, not out of fear but out of preference. Silence here was not empty. It was structured, predictable. He knew which sounds belonged and which ones did not. His days followed a pattern he never questioned. He woke before the sun, not because he needed to, but because his body still expected it. He drank his coffee without turning on anything that talked back. He worked until there was nothing left to fix, then stopped. At night, he sat with the lights low and let the dark do what it always did, press in gently, without demand. Silence kept things contained. It kept memories where they belonged. That night was no different, at least not at first. He went to bed late, the house already quiet, the air heavy with the stillness that came before rain. Sleep came easily, deep and untroubled, the way it did when nothing in the world was asking for him. The sound that woke him did not belong. It was faint, almost careful, like something testing whether it was allowed to exist. He stayed still, listening, counting the seconds between breaths. The sound came again, closer this time, followed by a scrape against wood that carried weight behind it. He sat up slowly. Silence returned, thick and watchful, and for a moment he wondered if the night had fooled him. Then there was breathing outside his door, uneven, controlled but strained, like an effort that had been going on too long. He stood and crossed the room without turning on the light. He opened the door just enough to see. The German shepherd stood at the edge of the porch, body angled slightly away, as if it was prepared to leave if it had misjudged him. Its coat was dark with dirt and rain, clinging close to a frame that looked leaner than it should have been. One front leg bore most of its weight while the other barely touched the ground. Its head stayed level, eyes fixed on him, not pleading, not aggressive. Waiting. The man did not step forward. He noticed details instead. The stiffness in the dog's posture, the old tear along one ear that had healed unevenly, the way its breathing slowed when he did not move closer, as if distance was part of what it needed. The dog shifted once, corrected itself, and remained standing. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The forest stayed quiet behind the dog. The house stayed quiet behind the man. The space between them held. Then the dog took one step forward. It stopped there, close enough to show intent, far enough to keep control. It did not ask for touch. It did not lower itself. It simply chose him and waited to see what he would do. The man stayed where he was, letting the silence absorb the decision forming inside him. By the time he finally closed the door behind them both, the choice had already been made, even if he had not named it yet. And the silence he had built his life around shifted, just enough to let something else exist within it. He did not bring the dog fully inside at first. He left the door open just enough for air to move between the porch and the house, as if crossing that line required something more than intention. The shepherd remained near the threshold, not stepping in without invitation, not retreating either. It lowered itself carefully onto the wooden boards, favoring the injured leg, breathing measured and slow. He crouched at a distance where he could see clearly without crowding. The injuries were not dramatic, no fresh blood pooling, no visible breaks. What he saw instead was exhaustion layered over older damage, scrapes along the shoulder where a harness would sit, pressure marks near the ribs that spoke of equipment worn too long, a body built for work that had carried it past the point of rest. The dog's eyes tracked him, not nervously but with attention. It watched his hands, watched his breathing, measured him the way trained animals measure a handler before accepting direction. That detail settled deeper than it should have. He reached for a bowl and filled it halfway with water, setting it down within the dog's reach but not pushing it closer. The shepherd looked at the bowl, then at him, then back again, as if checking whether this was a test. Only when he leaned back did it lower its head and drink, small controlled pulls, not desperate, not rushed. When it finished, it tried to stand again. This time, the leg gave more than before. The body dipped sharply and corrected itself too late. The shepherd folded downward, catching itself with the good leg but failing to rise again. It did not cry out. It did not whine. It simply remained where it had fallen, chest rising faster now, pride fighting something it could no longer contain. The man moved without hesitation. He knelt beside the dog and placed one steady hand along its side, applying firm pressure to ground it. The dog stiffened for a fraction of a second, then stilled completely, accepting the contact as if it had been waiting for it. His hands worked with quiet certainty. He checked the gums first, pale but responsive. He pressed along the ribcage, feeling for fractures, counting breaths between presses. His thumb found swelling near the shoulder and stopped there, calculating pressure without looking like he was calculating at all. And then the memory came. Not a flood, just one sharp image. A different shepherd, younger, lying in dust instead of damp wood. The smell of heat and fuel in the air. A handler kneeling beside him, voice steady but eyes too wide. The weight of a field kit in his own hands. Blood seeping through fur while he tightened a wrap around a wound that could not wait. He remembered pressing down to stop the bleeding. Remembered saying, "Stay with me," not because the dog understood the words, but because it needed the tone. The memory stopped there, as it always did. Unfinished. He blinked and the porch returned. The present returned. The shepherd beneath his hands breathed unevenly but did not resist. He adjusted the dog's position carefully, lifting just enough to ease strain from the injured leg. He tore clean fabric from an old shirt without looking for scissors, folding it into a compression wrap that his fingers remembered better than his mind did. He worked slowly, deliberate, each movement controlled, each knot secured with the same precision he had once relied on when mistakes had cost more than pride. The dog never pulled away. It did not lick his hands. It did not whimper. It simply watched his face as if confirming that he knew what he was doing. When he finished, he sat back slightly, hands still resting against the dog's side. The breathing had slowed, not strong yet but steadier. The eyes, which had remained open through most of it, finally closed. Not in surrender, in trust. He stayed there longer than necessary, listening to the rhythm of breath returning to something close to normal. The rain began sometime after that, soft against the roof, the kind of sound that usually blended into his chosen silence. Tonight it did not feel empty. It felt shared, but the dog did not leave after that. When morning came, it came quietly, light easing through the trees instead of announcing itself. The rain had stopped, leaving the ground dark and soft, the air cool enough to make breath visible for a moment before it disappeared. The man woke in the chair near the door, stiffness settling into his back where sleep had not fully claimed him. He noticed the dog before he noticed anything else. The German shepherd lay where he had left it, body turned slightly toward the house now, as if the line between outside and inside had shifted overnight. The wrap along its shoulder was still in place. The injured leg had not moved much, but the breathing was steadier, deeper than it had been before. One ear twitched when the man stood, catching the sound of movement immediately. "You're still here," he said, more observation than greeting. The dog did not lift its head. It did not need to. Its tail moved once, slow and controlled, then stilled again. He brought more water, set it down, and waited. The dog drank without hesitation this time, longer pulls, less caution. When it finished, it rested its head back on the floor and closed its eyes again. The man noticed how carefully it conserved movement, how every small action seemed measured, like it was counting what it had left. He went about the morning without noise, no radio, no unnecessary steps. He worked around the dog, not over it, shifting his routine so the space stayed calm. When he moved tools, he did it slowly. When he closed doors, he eased them instead of letting them latch. It came naturally, the way adapting always had. By midday, the dog attempted to stand again. It rose halfway, paused, then lowered itself back down, breathing heavier now, effort visible in the tension along its neck and shoulders. The man knelt beside it and placed a hand where it could feel him without being restrained. The dog leaned into the contact briefly, just enough to confirm balance, then pulled back, pride intact even as strength faded. "You don't have to prove anything," the man said quietly. The dog's eyes stayed on him, alert, listening in a way that went beyond sound. He brought food next, something plain and soft, placed close enough that the dog did not have to shift much to reach it. The shepherd sniffed, hesitated, then ate slowly. Halfway through, it stopped, breathing uneven again, and rested its head on the ground. That was when the man felt the change. Not dramatic, not sudden, just a subtle difference in weight and presence, like a structure settling too far into itself. The dog's body relaxed in a way that was not chosen. The control that had held it upright since the night before loosened, just enough to matter. He checked the wrap, still secure. He checked the breathing again, slower now but heavier, as if each breath required more effort than the last. The dog did not resist the examination. It no longer felt the need to. Something tightened in his chest, a warning he recognized before he allowed it to have a name. He sat back on his heels and watched the dog closely, counting breaths, measuring the spaces between them. The shepherd opened its eyes once more and looked at him, not searching, not asking. Just present. The man stayed there, hand resting against the dog's side, listening to the quiet that had once been enough for him and now felt different, heavier, like it was waiting for something to happen. And for the first time since the dog arrived, he understood that waiting might no longer be an option. The dog tried to stand again in the late afternoon, when the light had begun to soften and the air cooled enough to make movement feel possible. It gathered itself slowly, shifting weight the way it had done all its life, adjusting angles, compensating without complaint. For a moment, it looked like it might manage it. Then the strength simply wasn't there. The front leg folded inward, not sharply, not violently, just enough to break the balance it had been holding together by discipline alone. The dog dropped to its side this time, breath leaving its chest in a rough pull that did not recover on its own. Its head lifted once, then settled back against the floor, eyes open but unfocused. The man was moving before the sound fully reached him. He was beside the dog in seconds, one knee down, one hand firm against the ribcage, grounding it the way he once had in places where hesitation cost lives. He spoke without thinking, the words low and steady, not meant to comfort but to anchor. "Stay with me." The dog's chest shuddered, breath uneven, muscles tight with effort it could no longer control. The man checked the gums again, paler now. He pressed along the shoulder and felt heat where there should not have been. Infection, exhaustion, something layered on top of old damage. The kind of thing that did not announce itself until the body gave up trying to hide it. He reached for the supplies he had already laid out because some part of him had known this moment was coming. Clean cloth, water, pressure where pressure mattered. He adjusted the dog's position, lifting just enough to ease the strain on the lungs, bracing the head so the airway stayed clear. And the memory came back harder this time. Not a flash, but a full weight. A shepherd pinned beneath debris, breathing wrong, eyes locked on him while everything else burned and shouted. His hands working fast, voice steady even as his chest tightened. Someone yelling for him to move, to leave, to save himself. Him refusing, fingers slick with blood, knowing exactly how long he had before the body beneath his hands decided for him. That dog had not made it. The man felt the echo of that moment rise in his throat now, sharp and unwelcome, and for the first time in years he did not push it down. He stayed where he was, hands steady, breathing slow, letting the memory exist alongside the present instead of replacing it. "Not again," he said quietly, and this time the words were not an order. They were a promise. He adjusted the wrap, tightened it where swelling had increased, eased pressure where the dog flinched despite itself. He spoke as he worked, not loud, not rushed, his voice carrying the same tone it always had when everything else fell apart. The dog's breathing hitched once, then again, then began to slow, each breath deeper than the last. Minutes passed, or maybe only seconds. Time stretched the way it always did in moments like this, losing shape until only outcomes mattered. The dog's eyes found his face again. This time they did not look guarded, they did not look tired. They looked like something letting go of a burden. When the breathing finally steadied, the man stayed where he was, hands still in place, afraid to move too soon. The dog did not try to rise. It did not need to. Its body rested fully now, weight given over instead of held back. The man sat there in the quiet he had built for himself, and realized it had never been silence he wanted. It had been the absence of chaos. It had been peace. And peace, he understood now, was not something you found by pushing the world away. It was something that arrived when you chose to stay, even when staying meant remembering everything you had tried to forget. The night settled in slowly after that, not with the sharp drop that usually followed pain or fear, but with a gradual easing like the world deciding to lower its voice. The man stayed on the floor beside the dog long after the worst had passed, his back against the wall, one hand resting where he could feel the rise and fall of the dog's chest without needing to look. He did not sleep. He did not need to. Being there was enough. At some point the dog shifted, just slightly, adjusting its weight so its flank pressed closer to his leg. It was a small movement, deliberate, careful, the kind made by an animal that had learned not to ask for comfort but was finally willing to accept it. The man did not react right away. He let the moment exist without naming it, without reaching to claim it. When he finally rested his palm more firmly against the dog's shoulder, the tension beneath the fur softened instead of tightening. Morning came pale and quiet. The dog was still weak when it woke, but it lifted its head on its own this time, eyes clearer, breath steady enough that the man did not have to count it anymore. He brought water slowly, letting the dog decide when to drink. He offered food later, torn into small pieces, set close but not pushed. The dog ate without urgency, stopping often, watching the room, watching him, as if recalibrating a world that had shifted overnight. The man noticed how naturally he had fallen back into routine, checking temperature with the back of his hand, watching posture, listening not just for sound but for what was missing. These habits had lived dormant in him for years, buried under the decision to want nothing, to need nothing. He realized now they had never left. They had simply been waiting. By afternoon, the dog was able to stand again, shaky but determined, leaning its weight just enough toward him to signal trust without surrender. The man adjusted the space instinctively, moving furniture, clearing a path, making the room work for the body that now shared it. There was no conversation, no declaration, just quiet cooperation. He thought briefly about calling someone, a vet, an old contact, anyone who might step in and take over. The thought passed without settling. He knew how this ended if he handed the responsibility away too quickly. He had seen it before. Systems meant well, but they did not sit on the floor all night. They did not remember the exact way a body shook before it steadied. The dog chose a spot near the window and lay down, head angled so it could see both the room and the outside. Not guarding, just aware. The man sat nearby, the silence between them no longer hollow, no longer heavy. It held shape now. It held meaning. As days passed, the dog grew stronger in small, measurable ways. A longer walk to the edge of the property. A steadier stance. A tail that lifted just enough to show intention without excitement. The man adjusted with it, finding himself speaking more, not because he needed to fill the quiet, but because words no longer felt intrusive. He did not tell anyone about the dog's scars. He did not ask where it had come from. Some histories did not need retelling to be honored. One evening, as the light faded and the room settled into its familiar calm, the dog rested its head fully against his leg and stayed there. No tension, no readiness to move away, just contact, uncomplicated and complete. The man closed his eyes, not to escape the world but to sit fully inside it. He understood then that silence had never been the goal. Silence was what he chose when he thought peace was something you reached by withdrawing. But peace, real peace, was this: staying, remembering, and letting something broken trust you enough to rest.